Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dig In podcast. Today, I am very excited by our guest. We are joined by Elizabeth Oates, previously VP Consumer Insights and Guest Services at Ulta Beauty, and now the author of More Than Just Interesting, How to Build an Insights Function for Impact. Elizabeth, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion as well.
Okay, well, we're going to get going with an impromptu question here, Elizabeth. You haven't heard this one from me. If you could be any superhero, which one would you be?
Ooh, I would be Elastigirl. She's the mom from The Incredibles. I mean, she's not like specifically, perfect or young or anything like that, but I'm not really excited about like her stretchiness, but I like who she is, right? She is someone who like fights for what she believes in, and she's tough and she's resilient, and she does it all while being this total kick-ass mom.
That sounds like a good one to be. I like that one. So let's start with you telling us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me again. I'm just looking forward to this conversation. And this is something I'm really passionate about, so I'd love to talk about it. But getting here to this point, I've spent about the last 20 years driving consumer centricity. And I have been lucky enough to do that across several industries, including CPG, financial services, and retail. And through that time, I've found a passion for pushing businesses forward by leading and leading in to what consumers want and need. It's what drives the businesses for the short and the long term. So that's how I got here, 20 years in insights. But right now, I'm investing my time in promoting and sharing my passion with others. I've just written a book, as you mentioned, thank you, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about. I'm promoting that book. I'm guest lecturing for university classes. I am conducting training workshops for insights professionals, and I'm consulting with businesses on how to drive consumer centricity in their context. So if I can admit it, I'm also having a lot of fun.
Yeah, gosh, fair enough. You've earned it. That's fantastic. And one of the things I love about your background is that it does have that diversity across different industries that I personally loved seeing as examples in the book because it's just great personification of how these sort of insights philosophies can transcend across different industries. So we're going to get into that. We're going to dig in now. Our listeners do really crave inspiration from other leaders. And I think one of the best ways to inspire is to tell a story. And I'm sure that many of our listeners have had aspirations at some point of writing a book. I think it's something we all kind of think maybe I'll do that someday. But it's such an accomplishment to actually get it out in the world. So for this book, More Than Just Interesting, How to Build an Insights Function for Impact, it was published just in July this year. What was the inspiration behind actually sitting down and writing a book?
Well, Jess, I do a lot of speaking at conferences and within organizations. And in doing so, I have been lucky enough to find opportunities to inspire audiences to think towards the future. And one of my foundational topics as a presenter has been never be interesting. And if you can believe it, people actually showed up to a presentation called that. But even more so, it's really about that it became well received, the content and the ideas did. And the essential idea and inspiration in that content was for insights professionals that we need to be more than just interesting. We need to be impactful. We are here not as a someone to put a book or a binder on a shelf, but as a way to drive a business forward and into the future for the long term. So all of that culminated on this really positive reception for the topic. And so I started writing things down and outlining content in other shareable ways. And that was really the origin of what kind of brought me to this book writing process.
Mm-hmm. And would you say it was a traditional path to how a book is traditionally written, or did you have sort of a different approach to it?
Well, okay, here's the real and true answer. I don't know because this is the first time I've ever done it,
First
right?
time.
So it's the only path I've ever taken. But for me, it was truly it started out as I outlined the content on an airplane, right? I was actually, okay, I'll have to admit it, on a girls' trip in January of 2020. And I drafted the first outline on the plane to Mexico. So then I
Wow.
wrote from there the first chapter sitting by the pool, which, okay, that sounds pretty traditional to me, right? That's the everyone does it, right? So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
traditional. No, but in all seriousness, once I had that first outline and the first chapter, I started to get really excited about it. And I started filling in content for the whole outline. But what I realized was that it was all my own voice. And
Hmm.
so I phoned some friends who happened to be industry experts and asked for their thoughts. And through the course of what turned out to be some really fun interviews, I was able to add additional voices and expertise and ideas to the outline and filling in that outline. So the content resonated with each of them, and it really solidified my story from there. So then I found a few more friends, and to those who had either written books or were currently writing them. And they put me in contact with editors and publishers and self publishing options. And I sorted through all of the options and found a publisher that would work best for me. So I contacted them, and Paramount Market Publishing was interested, right? And they asked me how long it would take for me to fill out the entire book and write the full manuscript. And I was like, ooh, I'm working full time, I'm a mom, probably a really long time, like, 12 months. That
Yeah.
was 4 years ago. So it did actually take me a long time and even longer than I thought. But, going back to that starting point, I mentioned that I started writing in January of 2020. Well, we all know what happened shortly after that. So my writing was derailed rather quickly. And while I was working full time and teaching at home full time, and just trying to manage all of that, I decided that I needed a goal. Like if this book was really going to be a thing, I needed to set myself a goal, and that was at that point to write one paragraph a week. And some weeks I even
Yeah.
managed that goal of one per week. So, as life started getting back into normalcy just a bit, I found myself with a few more moments. And one moment was that weekly, my youngest daughter was taking a ballet class. And so for 40 minutes every week, I could sit outside of her class where no one needed to talk to me, and I could just write. So my one paragraph per week became actually doable. And I did it, yes, sitting outside of a ballet class, one paragraph at a time. I also wrote when we were driving in the car on road trips, my partner was driving, and in quiet moments, like on airplanes and family vacations and work trips. So let me tell you, the ballet didn't stick, Jess. We found other passions, luckily, but what did stick was the content. And so I'm really glad that I stuck with it and that I did it. So early this year, I got back to Paramount Market Publishing, and they looked at the content, and we signed a deal, and the book published in July. So here we are.
That's an incredible journey. And wow, what persistence. And to not maybe get, demotivated from perhaps you had a week where you couldn't contribute that paragraph, but
Yeah.
really sticking with it. So, and you did talk about some of the barriers, but did you have to pivot at any point in a really significant way?
Yeah, for me, the biggest barrier was time. And it's hard to keep momentum when you're disrupted so frequently. And
Hmm.
so there were many times where I had to kind of go back and reread just to ensure the content still flowed. If you're writing in such little chunks, it could be easy to veer off course. So I also, I mentioned that I had asked some industry experts for input. And I did also get some feedback on the content. And they say feedback is a gift, right? And it is, it truly is. And in some cases, that feedback made me rethink my approach to my content. So I
Hmm.
did have some barriers where I had to do some rewriting, but it was because it was challenging the content to be the best that it could. So,
Hmm.
in rewriting, I wanted to ensure that my ideas were clear, and that they were. I also like concise, because no one has time to read a whole book often
Yeah.
as well. But feedback I think can sometimes feel like a teardown, but looking back, it truly did help me build something much bigger and better. And that's a hard process to go through when you're doing something just as a passion project over the course of 4 years.
Sure. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And feedback is a gift, but man, it's a lot to manage and navigate, right? So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah. And we're going to get into some of your philosophies and share from the book in a moment, but I would love to just know, how will you measure success of the book? Like, do you have a milestone that maybe you've already reached or that you're shooting for?
Well, the book itself, isn't long. It's just over 100 pages, to be honest. But it's chock full of content because I wanted this book to be the one that people use, the one that they carry around in their backpacks and their briefcases. I talk about not wanting to have research that's like in a report that's in a pretty binder on a shelf. And the same thing was, success for me is having a book that's also not just a pretty book on a hardcover on a shelf. So I wanted it to be the one that's written in and earmarked and carried with for the reader. That to me is success. And it's a long way of saying what success is. But part of it also is having an impact, a positive impact on insights professionals. So if I can help someone succeed at their role, at their job, and in their organization, I'm going to count that as success as well. I'm really pleased to say that I've actually gotten a few calls and notes that folks have bought and used the book. So that's awesome. And even
Mm-hmm.
a few calls where they said they bought it for someone else. They were going to keep their own copy and then get the book for someone else. And I was like, oh my goodness, my heart was exploding with joy. But when you hear that someone doing that, it really makes you think, this is really cool and that's really meaningful content. So it made my
Yeah.
heart sing.
Yeah, well, as it should. And I really love in the opening of the book, you talk about this is great for people that are new in the insights profession. It's great for folks that have been doing this for years to kind of revisit some of those lessons learned. So I found that to be super relevant for me personally. So I'd love to turn to some of the concepts and philosophies in the book. One thing that you already mentioned is this idea of consumer centricity. What is your
Yeah.
unique take on consumer centricity and why is it so important?
I'm so glad you asked. I really do. I think like I have a definition,
Hmm.
of consumer centricity that I live and breathe by. But really, I think that at its core, consumer centricity is defined by two things. One is how an organization makes decisions with consumers in mind, and two, how an organization brings its products and services and messages to life for consumers. Now, each of those is important, right? And we often go right to that second one because how we bring our products and services and messages to life offers like really tangible evidence that we're doing something in line with consumer wants and needs. Now, don't get me wrong, that is super critical, right?
Yep.
For example, when I was working in retail, I knew that if I didn't provide the goods or services that my customers wanted, there would be a line of like a dozen retailers who were willing to give it a shot.
Yep.
So consumers have choices. So winning those choices requires showing up in ways that are really meaningful and obvious to them. So, and not but, and that first one is also important, making decisions with consumers in mind, because not all business decisions are visible for a customer or a potential customer. But those decisions will eventually impact those customers. So even when we're behind closed doors or in a conference room, we have to make choices with consumers in mind. It really is the foundation that sets up our ability to show up in a meaningful way.
So you've worked across so many brands in your career. Do you have an example of where you've really set the stage for what consumer centricity is foundationally for, say, a brand team?
Sure. And let me tell you, Jess, can I go with a time where I got it wrong?
Please, those are
Because
the
I
best.
think we all learn from those experiences as well. So I won't say back how many years ago, but a few years ago, I was working with the Progresso brand team at General Mills. And the food scientists had come up with a really incredible frozen soup where you kind of like you put it in a pan and it melts and it makes this like homemade flavor, so good soup. And so we thought, like, this product is amazing because it was. But when we put it into test, we found out that we didn't quite get it right. So let me tell you what we got wrong. So we made this frozen soup and we put it in really large size packages in a club store. And the chicken noodle flavor was the hero SKU. And so we put all of that into the store, and I stood outside the freezer section and watched consumers either pick it up and put it in their cart, but mostly pick it up and put it back. And then I would ask them why, right? And it turns out that they loved the idea. And even when we did product testing, the flavor was amazing. The product was great. But what we got wrong was nobody wants that much frozen soup. Like a club size double version was just too
Yeah.
much. And
Hmm.
we also learned that, hey, the chicken noodle in a can was sort of good enough. So if they're going to go to the expense and space of frozen, they wanted something they couldn't make at home or couldn't get well out of a can. So we got the size wrong. We got the location wrong. We got the flavor wrong, even though it was a great product. And coming
Yep.
back and saying, wait, to the team, there's so much that's right, but also there's reasons that this isn't going to be a success helps the business because it actually ended up being a non-investment in something that would have been a failure. So it really was consumer centricity, even though consumers didn't know we were making choices based on their behalves. It was the right thing for the company as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that example. And it's so funny because as soon as I asked that question, I thought, oh, I hope she talks about the frozen soup because there's been so many, client projects I've consulted on where it's like the product that was made is a great product. And it's just, you
Yeah,
need to sometimes find the right time and place and position and all the things that need to work out. But sometimes
absolutely.
those things are not aligned. So that's a great example. Another thing you talk about a lot in the book, which I find really compelling, are some of the core skills that are important for the insights function. And I have a favorite, but I'll let you kind of give maybe a couple of your favorite. What are some of those skills that you think are just paramount as our industry evolves?
You got it. This is a passion point for me too, so I'm really curious as to which of those is your favorite. But you're right,
Yeah.
nine. I came up with nine, and I built those nine over a decade ago. And I believe that they are still as relevant as ever. And given it isn't a 4 hour podcast, I'll be brief, but and just highlight a few. And I'm going to highlight the development of partnerships and proactive planning. And so the idea of the development of partnerships reflects that in order to be impactful, we as insights professionals need to have productive working relationships with others around us. So insights don't happen in a vacuum and they don't become impactful in a vacuum, right? Unless you're an organization of one, you need to have a partnership with someone who's going to take action on those insights. So you have to develop true, and I keep using the word partnerships because you have to think about it as a two-way street, understanding what their needs are and listening and talking and dialoguing, right? It's partnership. And as part of that, understanding what your partners are facing, how they think about their business, and what will enable them to make choices that are right for customers. So it's about a trusted relationship. That's the true
Yeah.
partnership. Um, and it doesn't mean that you have to tell them what they want to hear. But it does mean building trust so that when you have to deliver unwanted or bad news, your partners will lean in and listen and take the right action. So, building partnerships will take you further as an insights professional. And importantly, it'll make your business more successful. So, there's one.
Yep.
And the second, I think, is the partner to the partner, if I can say that. It's really about proactive planning. So, one of the hardest things that we as insights professionals face is the need to move at the speed of the business, not the speed of the insights, right? We no longer have the luxury of saying, hey, partner, thanks. That's a great question. I'm going to take that, do some thinking, and I'm going to get back to you in like 12 to 14 weeks. Okay, cool.
Right.
No,
Right.
if you say that today, you'll get laughed out of a room, right?
Yep.
So, beyond finding like speedier methodologies, we have to think ahead. And if you've built a partnership and you know what your partners are facing, you can then employ the skill of proactive planning because you can plan ahead for what the business will need. You can plan for decision making cycles. You can plan in a way that you can do quality research and deliver insights at the right time. It really, I kind of laugh here, and you'll probably laugh at this example too, but it fascinated me early in my retail career when we were scrambling for insights for holiday. Like,
Yep.
didn't we realize that December 25th happens on December 25th, like every year? So,
Yep.
as my teams, we got better at this proactive planning skill, that surprise was removed and it was replaced with impact.
Yeah. And another personification of that idea that you gave in the book was related to your time at Kohl's when there was sort of this monster learning goal. And so you and your team developed a quite robust, research plan to address it. And as it sounds like as stellar as those insights were, they weren't like delivered at the time that the business can really even use them. And I thought that was such a great and probably very painful at the time, but
Right.
such a important example of how if the insights you're delivering are not aligned with some of those planning or executional factors, then unfortunately it is not going to be leveraged in the way you want.
Absolutely. And it's like, unfortunately, a lesson that I had to learn. So I want someone else not to have to learn it in the hard
Right.
way.
Yeah.
But you're right, because as we talk about things like partnerships and proactive planning, out of the 9 core skills I've built for insights teams, only 2 are about actually doing insights, right? Because the other 7 are about how do you take what you've learned and uncovered and built and communicate to the business in the right way and in the right time with the right context so
Yeah.
that you can be impactful. Like, that's
Yeah.
the real runway to impact.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, do you want to know my favorite? Because I
Yes, I do.
appreciated
Please.
all the skills. Okay. So the one that really resonated with me is about understanding the business context, because I think it's something that can often be sort of uh, I think it's often underrepresented in how some insights professionals might tackle a problem because they dive so deep into what's the research objective? How am I going to answer that with flawless research? And they forget about the context that's going on in that client's environment. So, how are decisions made? Who has the power to actually make those decisions? And how are different functions involved? What is the planning cycle? We've been talking a lot about planning, et cetera. If you don't understand that, then you can deliver an insight that just can't be acted upon, or you deliver it almost in a currency that the stakeholder doesn't understand. And so I
Right.
thought that one was so impactful, not just for how you deliver insights, but also how you should be designing and planning for those insights, right? It's just understanding that business
Absolutely.
context is absolutely critical today in a way that I don't think it was maybe even 15 years ago. It just seems like now we're expected as insights professionals to be so cross disciplinarian.
Mhm.
It's a must.
Absolutely. I love that one. Thank you for highlighting that one too, because you're right. We have to deliver insights in a way that the business can take action on. And the risk of getting it wrong is really harmful, because then we'll have
Yeah.
wasted time resources, we'll have wasted people resources, dollar resources, and it could actually erode the partnerships that we were building. So, but if you get it right, it actually also pushes all of those things forward.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, you gave a sneak peek of those core skills, and hopefully, folks will read the book to learn the rest. And to your point about wanting to have dog-eared, covers, that's where my
Oh, I love
highlights
it.
come in. So just know that it really is well worth the read. So, what's your hot take on the future of the insights industry? And I realize that that is like a holy smokes type of question, but I can't wait to hear your response to it.
Okay, so for me, the role of insights is only going to get more important, like, period. And I could expand on that just a little bit, but I think our role and the need for investing in insights and understanding consumers will only get important for, I'll list you at least 3 reasons. One is that AI is here, right? And everybody take a breath. I don't believe that AI is going to take our jobs. No, it's going to be a tool for us to help do our jobs better. So as we work through using Gen AI in new ways, it will be the job of insights professionals to ensure that humans remain at the center of decisions. So we have to continue to play that role, and even more so now than ever before. The second reason I think that we're going to have to really lean in to insights is that competition is fierce, right? And it's only getting more so, right? We
Yeah.
can no longer just make, a better, faster, cheaper widget or whatever we're making. We really have to understand that the job that that widget or thing or service, does for our consumers. So we therefore have to understand our consumers. And so, hey, That's us, people. That's our job. And so that makes our job, even more important. And then the third, Jess, is that I believe that the future won't look like the past. And we need to understand how consumers are looking forward in order to successfully navigate the future. And so that also is going to require consumer insights. So I guess all in, like if I'm placing bets, I am betting on the need for insights professionals to continually develop themselves, to continually have impact on their businesses. And I'm also betting on the need for organizations to invest in quality insights.
Yep. Well, sign me up for that future because I think that's a great optimistic way to look at it. And we'll accept those challenges, right? So I love
Yes.
that. So we're going to move to the final dig. This is all about you just as a person, as a consumer. So feel free to, most of our guests don't have a work version of themselves and a personal version of themselves. We
True.
tend to see them all, but you just do you. It's all good.
Okay.
What's the last product or service that you bought on impulse?
Oh, the last thing I bought at Impulse was a wreath for my front door. So if you
Yeah.
want to get me to buy something, just add glitter. And for real, like it'll be a shiny object that I just can't resist. So yes, the wreath got me.
So glitter in our household, my husband just cannot handle it. So I'm on the
Oh
opposite
no.
side of that, unfortunately, but I will live vicariously through your glitter purchases. So that's fantastic.
Awesome.
Um, what's a category or a brand that you could rationalize any price point for? You just have to have it in your life.
Oh, this one's easy for me, Jess. Running shoes. So
That's
I
right.
will
You're a
cross.
marathoner.
I am. I'll cross about 1,400 miles again this year. So good shoes are worth every penny. Yeah.
Yes, I should say so. I love this one for people. Brands have distinct personalities, as we know. So, what's a brand that you would date, and what's a brand you would marry? And it's okay if those brands are two different brands.
I think I would start with who am I going to date? I'm going to date the North Face. But
Hmm.
back when they were sponsoring endurance runs and in the endurance series, because I think that that would be a brand that could then push me like over the hump of like, yeah, I'm going to stop talking about signing up for one of these things and actually go do it. So
Hmm.
I think that would be
Yeah,
cool. But I think I would marry Lucky Charms. And
I love that
I
one.
mean, is there a better way to start your day than having breakfast and thinking about your dreams or like what's at the end of the rainbow? So, I don't even like the marshmallows and Lucky Charms, but I love like all of the powers and the dreams they represent.
Oh, that's fantastic. And yeah, I was going to ask if you're a marshmallow person because we have sort of a split vote in the population, right? Those that do and do not partake in the marshmallow. So
Yes, my
I'm a
kids
marshmallow
do.
gal.
So
Yeah.
they do. So I can just have like the other pieces and then they get all the
Yes.
marshmallows.
Yeah. Yeah. So what keeps you inspired every day, Elizabeth?
I thrive on change. And if there's one thing that we know for certain is that change will always come. So I'm here for the ride.
I love it. Well, that's a perfect way to sum up this conversation. And you've brought tremendous thinking about change for our industry in your book. I really do hope that you get lots of folks reading it and hopefully engaging you for some of those workshops you talked about as well, because I think that that would just be so beneficial to so many organizations. So thank you for joining us and giving us your inspiration and your wisdom today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me.